You're listening to The Traditional Millennial with Brittany Dotson, where conventional meets contemporary and faith fills the gaps. What's up, y'all? We are back on The Traditional Millennial. I am your host, Brittany Dotson, and on today's episode, what I'm going to be doing is basically opposing, refuting, or changing my mind about something that I thought was not true or could not be true previously. So when people used to say that love is not enough in relationships, in any relationship really, but especially in romantic relationships, I used to be like, what? How is it not enough? Like, love is everything. Like, if you have love, then everything is going to work out. Everything is going to be okay. There is nothing that you cannot conquer, nothing that you cannot overcome. Love is love, and it's going to be everything that you need for a relationship to survive. And I used to think that, but now with a little bit more thought, a little bit more just sitting with this idea, I've kind of changed my mind a little bit, just a little bit. But when we think about loving people, we have to first define what type of relationship we have with that person. And then within that relationship, we have to define what type of love we are giving to this person, or the love that we expect to receive from this person, because there are different types of love. There is a philo or brotherly love, just a friendly love. And then you have an agape love, which is more of a sacrificial love, or a love that's aimed, the desire is actually aimed to do something or towards something. So there are different types of love that we apply in different types of relationships. But when I think about this, I think about how over in First Peter, in that letter, how he was talking about our faith has to be supplemented. And he talked about, how we will be partakers in the divine nature, and that God has granted us just great and precious promises. And then he says, for this very reason, supplement your faith. Supplement your faith with virtue, with godliness, he said, with steadfastness, and a lot of different things. And so even in that, we see that everything we do is supplemented with something. And when we read in Matthew, I know we see that the first and the greatest commandment is love, but that would mean that it's not the only commandment. But it would also mean that love will be the undergirding and the foundation of all that we do. But the love we give still needs to be supplemented with something in order to stand, in order to hold up. And just like in First Peter, when he was talking about supplementing our faith, James also tells us that faith without works is dead. So without any work, it's dead, because what you do proves the faith you have. And it's the same thing with love. When we think about our relationships, especially romantic ones, we have to take into consideration that there are other factors involved in making those relationships work. People quote Proverbs 31 a lot, but when you read about how bad that woman was in Proverbs 31, or that woman is in Proverbs 31, it never said anything about the love she exhibited. It highlighted her actions. And so I want to read it real quick, because I read it again and I was like, dang, this woman is bad. So here it is. Proverbs 31, I think it starts at verse 10. Yes, it starts at verse 10. It says this. It says, an excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. Talks about her value right there. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She takes care of a man. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. As long as she's with him, that's what she's going to do. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. This woman is not lazy. She works. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She takes care of the people in her house, not just the kids, but everybody else that's working within the house. She considers a field and buys it. This is a businesswoman. Come on now. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. Again, she works. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Listen, we back at this business again. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. This woman is working. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is a servant. She is a giver. She is not stingy and she is not selfish. She is not afraid of snow for her household. See, she about that life. For all her household are clothed in scarlet. She taking care of them again. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. This woman know how to sew. Listen, this woman is going to sew that button back on your shirt. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Her husband has a good reputation because his wife has a good reputation. She does not make her man look bad in front of everybody. He can go out in public and be proud of the woman that he has at home. Come on now. She makes linen garments and sells them. Again, listen, this woman is an entrepreneur. She is about her business. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing. This woman has integrity and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. See, she ain't just on social media just talking mess. She ain't talking nonsense. She ain't full of junk. And the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Not only is she kind, she teaches kindness. Come on. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. She ain't just sitting up looking at the wall. She is busy doing something. She's making sure that she is not idle. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her children respect her. Her husband also, and he praises her. This is what her man has to say about her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. He said, look, I've known a lot of women who've done a lot of really good things. They've been really good women, but baby, you are the epitome of those women. You are the prototype woman. You are atypical. You go beyond excellent. You surpass excellent. You are greater than great. You're gooder than good. This is what her man has to say. Charm is deceitful. He didn't say this part. This is the rest of the verse. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears the Lord, for real, not just quoting scriptures on social media, not just reposting what people talking about on social media about the Lord. This woman really does love him for real. This woman is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates. Whew! Y'all, listen, it's so inspiring. When you read that, it's like, dang, I want to be that woman. Look, this woman was actionable, y'all. This woman is about her business. But that passage said nothing about love. But we know, of course, that we have to have love because, again, love is the first and the greatest commandment. But it takes more than that. It takes action that comes from a heart that wants to do what it takes to prove that love. So I want to read this now. Now that I've read that and it talks about action and we've been talking about supplemental stuff, I want to read 1 Corinthians 13 because we quote this all the time. I mean, you hear it all the time, especially at weddings. But I've seen a lot of people on social media replace the word love with their name. And so we see this verse in this letter, these verses in this letter quite a bit. So I'm going to read it real quick. 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Then it goes on to talk about, as for prophecies, they'll pass away. Tongues, they'll pass away. We know in part, but then we'll know fully. And at the end of this, it says, so now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love. So it's not just love there. We have faith, we have hope, we have a lot of other things that we have to apply in our lives. But of those things, love is the greatest, but love is supplemented by other things. You know, when I think about love itself, as it relates to this passage, love is basically an existence because God exists as love. It says God is love. The Bible tells us that. So love is an existence, but that existence has to be supplemented with action So basically, love is the means by which we live out what we feel and how we see a person. So if we have value for someone, it will show in what we do because it's who we are. So when people don't love you properly, it's more of a testament of who they are and not what you're doing. Because according to 1 Corinthians 13, what we just read, we are to exist this way, even if there is not a reciprocal force to give this back to us. You know, when I think about somewhere, I can't remember exactly where it is in the Bible. It might have been in one of the Gospels. I'm not 100% sure. I'll find it. But you know, it talks about only doing good for the people who do good for you. And when I think about that, only caring about the people who care about you has to be a very disappointing way to live. And let me tell you why. Yeah, I think it actually says it in Luke, now that I think about it. But I found out that the Bible is true when it says that doing good to those who do good by you is not the reward. The reward comes when you do good by those who don't do good by you. When you love and care only for the people who love and care for you, there's not much of a reward to celebrate, really. And y'all know we love being rewarded. Like, who doesn't? Like, and not in a sense of entitlement or attention seeking, but we love to know that what we're doing is paying off. So when you love and care for those who don't expect it, or for those who you don't even expect that you would care for in the first place, because they aren't in a position to care for you, that's something more fulfilling than caring for people that you sometimes feel obligated to care for because of who they are. And this is how we're always supposed to exist. We're always supposed to exist in a place that we are willing to give our love, to give our care, to give our hearts to people. But on the flip side of that now, listen, because I remember mentioning this in one of my Instagram stories. Y'all, loving people, it takes up a lot of space in your life. Like don't forget that, because even the Bible tells us not to give our pearls to swine, because they're gonna just trample over them. They're not gonna do anything with them. They're gonna waste them. So there is a such thing as wasting your love, wasting your life on people. You cannot afford to give your love to people who do not love you properly. Like, if you out here just giving your love to everybody and nobody's loving you back, you are not in a place to hold that. You're not in a place to be able to deal with that. So you have to be wise in this. I'm not saying, because I know what I just said about only loving the people that love you, or caring for the people doing good for those who do good to you. I'm not saying to only love those who love you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not dealing with just doing good by people and doing things out of love for people. Again, at the very beginning of this conversation, I was talking about the different types of love. And so when you do good by people, and you do good to those, even if they aren't doing good to you or by you or for you, that's more of a philo love. That's more of a brotherly love or a friendly love. When I say loving people takes up a lot of space, what I'm talking about is what I mentioned earlier, is the agape love. It's that love that is sacrificial, a love that has intention, a love that has an aim, it has an endpoint, and it takes a lot out of you to do it. Think about Christ. Christ loved us with an unconditional, literally a sacrificial love. He went to the cross. He became sin. He knew no sin. He became sin so that we can become the righteousness of God. He gave his life. He sacrificed his life for us. So he was the substitutionary atonement for us. He gave himself up in a sacrificial way to show us how much he loved us. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. God wanted us to know he loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us. That required a lot. But because Jesus knew what was on the other end of that, he was willing to do it. We got to know the same thing, but we also have to know that whenever we give ourselves in that way, we have to know that on the other side of that, there are going to be people who are willing to give themselves to us too in that same way. God knew that there were going to be people who were going to love him with all their heart, with all their soul, and with all their mind. He knew that. He knew there would be people who would choose him, who would accept him. And he offered it because he knew that. And even if Nobody in this world would accept Jesus. I'm pretty sure he still would have gone to the cross. But because he knew his sacrifice was so amazing, what he was going to take from us was so great. It was such an admirable and phenomenal act. He knew that there would be people in this world who could not help but accept what he did. He knew that. And of course, he knows everything. So he knew some of us were just going to do right anyway. But it requires a lot. That type of love does. And so when I say, you can't just give it out to anybody, you can't. You can't fill your life with people who aren't willing to love you back in return. When I think about even God, and how at the very beginning, before we were even here, God is love. Remember I said that. And even though God is love, and he is one with Christ and the Holy Spirit, he's always had someone to love who would love him back in the same way. He's never been by himself. He's always been surrounded with two other beings who loved him the way that he loved them. He wants the same for us. He does. But even in that, y'all, even when we think about relationships, when we think about romantic relationships, friendships, any type of relationship, especially romantic relationships, even in us loving these people in our lives, we have to know that sometimes it's not enough. We need more than that. We need to be willing to work for things. We need to be willing to go out of our way for things. We can't just say, oh, I love you. And we can't bandy about that word all the time and not actually do anything to show that we mean what we say. So when people say love is not enough, I kind of get it now. I'm on the other side of this coin thinking, okay, Brittany, maybe your way of thinking was flawed. Maybe these people had a point. Because it takes more than that. It takes you being willing to make a choice about this person every day, even when sometimes you may not like them. They may say something to you that you don't like. They may do something that you don't like. And it takes you even being able to, in those moments, to resolve conflict, being able to put your pride aside and say, okay, let's talk about it. It takes communication. It takes you listening. Active communication and being an active listener and being someone who can accept the truth and handle the truth. It takes you maybe doing some things sometimes that you wouldn't normally do. It takes compromise in some situations. It takes you being selfless a whole lot. It takes things that we sometimes have not been used to giving, but we need to be used to doing if we say we love someone. Love encompasses a lot, but it also requires a lot of us. And it doesn't require that we just say it. It requires us to do it because it is an existence. And if we exist in that way, God, again, is love. But God does not just say he loves us and doesn't do anything about it. He blesses us. He forgives us. He shows us mercy. He creates new mercies every day for us. He wakes us up in the morning. He gives us what we need. He supplies all of our needs. Whenever we go to him and ask him for something, if it lines up within his will, he gives it to us. God is a God who not only says he loves us, he shows us that he loves us. And so whenever we are dealing with other people, we need to be willing to do the same thing. We have to supplement our love with something. And, it's going to be different for different relationships and for different people, because what we do have to also understand is that different people require us to love them in different ways. We cannot assume that because we are a certain way that we're going to love someone based on who we are. You have to love people based on who they are and what they need. And in knowing that sometimes it's going to take us doing things outside of the norm, and that doesn't just benefit the person on the other end. A lot of times when we do things out of love for people, it helps us to grow. It makes us a better person. It helps to define our character and build our character. So the person on the other end is not the only one that benefits from that. When we do things from a pure place of love for a person who needs it, we also gain something beautiful from that too. And so when we think about this, when we think about loving people, when we think about relationships, when we think about being with people, when we think about, marriage and all of these things, it takes a lot more than just saying, I love you. It takes you existing in that place, choosing to do the things that will show that you are willing to not just say it, but you're willing to actually live it. And if you do that, I feel like, things will work out for the best for everybody involved, not just for the person that you are aiming your love at, but also from the person who is giving that love. So yeah, mindset has shifted. Things are a little different over here. I'm seeing things clearly now. But I just wanted to share that. Maybe it piqued somebody's interest and made you rethink just saying something to people, saying you care about them, saying you love them, saying you'll be there for them, but you actually are going to think about what you do that will prove or that will show a person or that person or those people on the other end that you actually mean what you say. Because remember, people don't have confidence in the things that we say. They have confidence in the things that we do. And if you always do what you say, your words will do more than evoke emotion in others. It will also bring about action in them. And so if you say what you mean when you mean what you say, others will be more inclined to believe it and move on it or move with it. So if you're a person who more often than not says, oh, I love you, but doesn't do anything behind it, or, oh, I care about you, or I'm going to be there for you, or I will sacrifice for you, or I'll do this for you. And then it always comes down to, oh, I tried and I did this and I didn't mean to. And I kind of, you never come through on anything. Then it's going to be harder to believe what you say. But if you actually do it, then people will have confidence in the love that you have for them. And they'll be willing to just give that same love back to you. All right, y'all. That is a wrap for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Listen, make sure you keep rocking with me. Keep tuning in on The Traditional Millennial, where conventional meets contemporary and faith fills the gaps.
Yeah.